conflict avoidance doesn't mean there isn't conflict. There's a lot of conflict. It's just not being communicated.
If I tell you you're a jackass, that's hard to hear. But if I tell you there's a part of you that's a jackass,
Yeah.
Now wait. Oh, it's just a part of me.
If there's energy, there's something to work through. I believe that I can only take my clients as far as I've gone myself.
There's no door for you to knock on and say, please give me the direction for my life. That you're going to have to find within. And is this helpful for you in your own spiritual development or not? Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome, Mendel.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here with Mendel Toron, a licensed therapist in private practice, and more importantly, the nephew of Schneur Hickson, one of my favorite people on the planet.
Oh, so. Okay. Well, thank you, Ellie, for having me.
Yeah. I think he shared that same seat as you not long ago.
Okay. Very
awesome.
Nice. I saw that.
Yeah. So welcome. I understand you're a COVID transplant.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time down here in Florida. And I have a lot of family, as you know, some of them. So coming down here was a natural step. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Beautiful. So
in the middle of the Midwest, and we were ready to grow.
So you practiced there?
So I was in, my training was there, and then I worked for St. Joseph Orphanage, which was a mental health institute specializing in trauma therapy over there. So working with Appalachia, doing some in-home family therapy, and then just, traditional.
Appalachia is?
Maybe the nickname is Hillbillies.
Gotcha.
So like rural Ohio, going out there and doing some work over there with those populations.
Got you. And down here you work with?
And now in my practice, primarily Jewish clients, not specifically Orthodox, adults and teens, and do some family therapy as well.
Explain family therapy. I'm interested in what that means and what that looks like.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people know individual work and couples work. I was thrown into family therapy in my training and just developed an interest in families, probably from my own healing in the Jewish community, my own family, and just dug deep into structural family therapy, Minuchin, and attachment-based family therapy, and some others as well.
So what would that look like practically? Would it be a teenager and a parent? Would it be?
Yeah, so it's more than two people. So it would be a teen, parents. It could be adult child with their adult parents.
And is there a primary patient, or the family is the patient?
So the family is the patient. And sometimes I'll work with an individual for a while, and then they'll be like, you know what, I'm open. Let's do this family thing that you talk about.
Gotcha.
And it's an experiential space. So I set the rules and the structure of what's helpful, what's not. It's a little bit more structured than an individual session.
Okay, so let's imagine two parents with a teenage son. Okay. What would that look like walking into your office when you say experiential?
I say, welcome to the space. I'll start with the introductions that, is it okay if I pause you at any time? It's not personal, but if I feel that something is unhelpful, I may ask you to pause. I will often turn to mom or dad with a message. If I feel something, I'll say, Dad, I think, if you're ever feeling overwhelmed, you're welcome to step out of the office, but I encourage you to hold the space. So kind of preempting that often a parent will want to walk out because there's a lot of emotional energy. So helping them to feel safe, building trust.
It's a parent who may want to walk out in your example.
Oh, yeah. Almost always the parent wants to walk out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The joke was in my office that someone's going to come storming out, and that's when the greatest change happens. That moment where you're like, oh, I think we've lost the family. And that's where the change happens. So it's very fast work. It moves things along very fast compared to like individual.
So you're talking a couple of sessions? Or
Yeah, even one like long session could have a pretty dramatic impact, but yeah, a couple of sessions can really work with some of the dynamics in the family.
Got you. And is a form of therapy that is traditionally trained? Did you develop it?
Yeah, no, no. I mean, we all have our own style. I think that I'm inspired by Minuchin and studied psychosomatic families. We're
Explain
getting
more.
really clinical.
Yeah,
but-
good.
okay. Psychosomatic families. He has a book on it, and he goes in. And I might say that the psychosomatic family is the Jewish family. Not all Jewish families, but a lot of them. And
What is a psychosomatic family?
I'm glad we're talking about
Yeah,
this.
me too.
This is great. This would never come up somewhere, so I'm glad. Psychosomatic family is from the outside very sociable and regular, seemingly regular family, but psychologists might say that they're the hardest family to actually change. Simply put, there's an avoidance of conflict, so an avoidance of direct communication. That can be communicating like direct emotion. And it could also be more subtle that we don't communicate our message directly. So the child communicates through the parents, or someone else will stop the conflict. Everyone's playing a game and we're all in it. So everybody in the room, including the therapist, if we're joining, becomes part of this dynamic. So the psychosomatic family, there's a few criteria. I don't know if I'm going to have it off the top of my head, but yeah, conflict avoidance is a big one. It's just the less harsh version of the anorexic family. So if you study family therapy, you'll study that a lot of anorexia is sourced in family dynamics. And how it's related is really interesting. And I wonder if I'd be able to explain. I'm sorry, I think. So there's the avoidance of conflict. What other characteristics would I see in a psychosomatic family?
You mentioned the communication, like the indirect communication.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen a lot of that.
You've seen a lot of that. And I always say that if somebody could feel their...
Not in my family, other families that I've, seen.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I always say that if I can help somebody feel their feelings and communicate them directly, I don't have a job. At least in this generation.
Right.
It's not going to... Next generation, it's not going to
Feel their feelings, communicate them direcally.
Yeah. If I can help somebody feel their feelings, and that means connect to their truth. And that is, a deep work. And then in turn, they'll communicate their needs, they'll set their boundaries, whatever it is that they need. Then yeah, I don't need a job. At least in this generation, I say. Next generation won't care about that.
So what do you mean when you say a psychosomatic family is a Jewish family or Jewish family is a psychosomatic family? What do you mean by that?
I would say that it's like a generational trauma thing, that we see these types of patterns where we can't hold space for difficult emotions. So we'll always be transferring the energy. We get overwhelmed with the emotion. So each one is transferring it. So we might see that the child takes on more adult roles, for example. A lot of what the work for me is so intuitive at this point. It's like all the reading that I've read. But I'm trying to think if I could give it a little bit more clarity for the listener. I would say that
There is no listener. There's only one listener right here. These conversations never get published. Don't worry about that.
there you go. Okay.
Yeah. I only say that to say that the value is in this conversation itself. I'm not asking a question that I think sometimes I'll point to the listener and I'll say, hey, if someone is listening, like let's clarify for them because I'm recognizing that I may understand something or not in this case, but we may have some background that someone else may not have. So let's give a little bit of color. But for the most part, the conversations are me having a conversation with you, me being curious about something. So I'm asking a question based on my own curiosity. So when you gave an example of a child playing the adult role, so what's happening there from a family from a family dynamic. Like individually, I've seen that, and I
Yeah.
can relate to that. What is the family doing that's creating that?
The family. Uh, well, then we get into a broader topic of emotional maturity, and the idea that often from generational trauma, our grandparents had a lot that they went through. And so emotionally, they may have been, if I'm going to be more blunt, like stunted to a certain extent. And so they're like young children, and the next generation's a little more mature and they could hold a little more space. And the child is from another level of consciousness, right? He has more maturity. So trying to grapple with it. So when the parent can't hold the emotional space and they, because it's not to blame the parent, but it gets let out, then the child naturally wants to soothe the parent or naturally wants to help. And often takes on roles that are not developmentally appropriate, or if we really get into family therapy, they play the in-between in the couple's relationship. So often children will mediate the conflict. Conflict avoidance doesn't mean there isn't conflict. There's a lot of conflict. It's just not being communicated. So another one is anger is not okay. Anger is dangerous. You see, as we're speaking, some of them will come up. So anger is not a healthy emotion. Anger was only used to when it was dangerous. Like I'm angry. But to normally it wasn't a safe emotion in the family. So
Right, meaning anger would end the entire interaction usually. It was used
exactly.
Right, not to move it forward in some way.
It was rage, not healthy anger.
Right. Okay, so the overwhelm of the parents would create this feeling in the child that says, hey, I want to take this off of them in some way. So let me step into the mature role, and I'm going to be the adult in the interaction.
Sure, it's an unconscious process. Like most things, it didn't choose it. It just,
understood.
We just felt whatever. The family needs to have equilibrium. Needs to have balance. Everything in life has to have balance. So our internal parts, internal family, right? Internal family systems is the type of therapy that I work with. And external families, they're working towards homeostasis, towards balance.
So, and how does that play out with multiple children and multiple siblings? You and I are both from fairly large families. So.
Sure. It's more complicated if I have a bigger family. So they're each taking on one aspect of the family needs or the parents. If there's a conflict about to happen, let's say in sessions, we might increase anger, right? Or we might increase conflict a little bit to bring it out. And then a random sibling might do something like to disturb the therapeutic process.
Maybe it could be a joke.
Yeah, a joke, and I'll be like, "Oh, that's interesting that you're choosing to do that," and that's kind of the approach. I'll be like, "Oh, isn't it curious, Mom, that you're speaking for your daughter?" Yeah. So, wouldn't it be more helpful if your daughter told me directly what she was feeling? Yeah. So, starting to have people speak for themselves. And then having people communicate directly how they feel. It sounds simple. It's like, no, Dad, turn to your son and say, I love you. And then, boom, emotion. Always a lot of emotion, always a lot of tears with family work. So, and it's beautiful work.
Amazing. And do you need the whole family there, or could it be, in order for you to do what you need to do, let's say there's a family of 5 children and you have 2 in the room with the 2 parents, that's enough for you to do what you
I work with what I got. Right. They're still in the room. Your family's with you. They're just not there. So I have to play the guessing game. It's a lot nicer when Mom is also there, or when everybody's there. Usually one family member pulls out to save the family. I'll say as an expression that if I get the whole family together, very rarely can I get the whole family together again. Somebody pulls out, gets busy, checks out. It's a lot. You can imagine having your own family. So it's very transformative work. I don't think most people don't come in for family work. It's usually like an afterthought. So,
but for you, is it the favorite part of your work?
Probably. I don't know if I tell people that. I'm EMDR therapist, trauma therapist, IFS. People come to me for individual work. That's what I'm known for. And the family work is like, yeah, a little personal pet project.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I touched on the right one. Do you know why that is? I mean, I can imagine, but what is it that makes your soul sing like this?
The joke with therapists that we're all just healing ourselves.
Right.
And sometimes like we really have to check ourselves. We have to have our own supervision. We have to have our own people that we're talking to. But if we grew up around families that had so much pain, and my family, was probably more of the psychosomatic. But I grew up even in extended families seeing more intense versions of that. And yeah, probably part of me wants to heal that. And so I'm still working through that. I always say that the things that you have too much energy, if there's energy, there's something to work through. If
What do you mean by that?
if you're being pulled to something, it's good. We're transforming it, I'm sure.
Right.
But it's also an opportunity to heal something deeper.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, I hear that. But how does that jive with, say, being passionate about something? Like, don't we want to maintain passion in certain areas?
Yeah. Uh, Passion without too much of a controlled agenda. Passion with love. Passion with openness. Passion with, if we're in an open state, of course we want to help people. Of course we want to contribute and connect. But if it feels like it's to a point where we're shoving something down somebody's throat, or we have too much of an agenda, that's where, and I'm just speaking freely here, then I'm curious about it. In IFS we speak about the environmentalist who wants to save the planet, but he takes on it. There's a trauma history there and there's still some burdens or some stuff that need to be released, and equal, the parts are still going to be there. We're still going to have passion. We're just healing them so it comes from a place of wholeness.
And we'll get the equilibrium internally instead of trying to create it externally.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
Got it. How did you get into the family work?
Family work, therapeutic work, maybe.
Yeah, maybe we can even take the question further.
Yeah. Family work was just random, but therapeutic work is more interesting. I think that growing up, I was a highly sensitive kid. In a time when it wasn't praised. I don't even know if it's praised now. It will be. But I was highly sensitive and attuned. And with that comes just feeling everything. And being, just everything that comes along with that, and the anxiety that came along with that, and just feeling everything so deeply.
Right.
I don't know if I can point to any profound trauma or experience that I could say. I could talk about attachment, parent-child, generational trauma stuff. That's traumatic enough. But for me, I had that and just struggled with anxiety. And it wasn't until I was like 18, 19 years old where I believe I asked my parents, like, I think I should work on this. Like, I don't think, is complacency, is this a good thing? We should just stay anxious and miserable. Like, I feel like that was something that I grew up with. Like, yeah, that's just what you are. You're just anxious, right. and you're just a downer. You're just and like labeling me or the person. And I went to therapy and it helped tremendously. And then I went on with my life not thinking I want to be a therapist. Completed yeshiva system. I don't have to go. We can go there, but completed that and started. Try to abbreviate, but right. Went to law school, left law school, found my passion. It was a calling, and that was that. So.
Yeah, I can see the excitement and the passion. It comes off you. It's nice.
Okay. I like to say I like to meet non-burnt out therapists. It's good.
Right. So that's the second time you made a comment that got my attention. That number one was therapists having supervision, and then this non-burnt out therapist idea. So speak to what you do as a therapist in order to keep yourself
Sane?
sane, clean. Yeah.
Yeah. We are humans, and therefore we must have. Well, let's start with supervision. Is the idea that we have somebody that we talk through our cases with, our biases, uh, the things that we feel charged by.
Is that the same as having a therapist?
So we have both.
What?
We have
both.
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 If I believe that I can only take my clients as far as I've gone myself, to a certain extent.
Right.
So yeah, having therapy for your own stuff, and then supervision for your clinical stuff. Therapy for your therapist. Your
Right.
cases. Yeah.
So, and most therapists are doing that, or is that standard practice?
I mean,
Let me ask you different. Is it required? No. But that's the way you keep yourself
passionate.
passionate. Okay, like that. Okay. So you'll have a self-appointed supervisor that you'll talk through your cases.
Multiple sometimes. I have to pay for that, and well, it's required to a certain extent till you're fully licensed. Then it's recommended.
Gotcha.
But I don't know.
Right. We're not here to talk about other therapists necessarily. It's more about yourself. Like, is it?
Yeah. No, but I definitely, if I'm speaking to the therapist, I highly encourage those going in their therapeutic journey to do their own work, and to anybody, right? That there's an opportunity for growth and opportunity for doing your own work, and that'll help you be a better therapist. And you gotta have people challenging. You have to do inquiry. You have to be that sounds almost like I have an agenda. But it's maybe I do.
Maybe you do. Yeah. Maybe it's okay too sometimes.
Yeah, I think so.
You mentioned generational trauma. How would you describe generational trauma to someone who doesn't have any therapeutic background, never been to therapy, zero understanding? What is generational trauma?
I'll do my best. So speaking on generational trauma, maybe specifically Jewish generational trauma, we're born into a world with a history before us. We're not the only existence that ever existed. We were born to parents and grandparents, and extended history till the beginning of time, since Adam and Chava, I guess you could say. But really, even in more recent history, there was wars, there was a Holocaust, there were things that happened to people, and with that, we had to form certain survival responses in order to function, in order to cope, and to manage. And sometimes black and white thinking, and certain not being able to be that open, full self. For how that gets passed down is often in literally emotional energy, and also the patterns that we do. So how we speak to people. When we're feeling threatened, we create parts to protect us. So we'll create a shame part, like, you're bad, do this, be like this, you're gonna die if you don't listen, right? It's the war. It's very intense. And those sort of ideas are passed down to a world where, for the most part, there is a lot of safety, more safety to a certain extent. And we still internalize those inherited messages. The critic is not, the inner critic you have may not even be your own. It's your parents or your great grandfathers. Yeah.
Right.
I see it when I speak to my grandparents. I say, I don't want to know who your parents are. I want to know who your grandparents are. That's a good first date question.
So you made a distinction between patterns and emotional energy. So I think I know what you mean by patterns, right? Because that's very easy to pass on to kids, this is the way we think, this is the way we speak, this is the way we behave, and then very quickly the next generation is as well. What did you mean by emotional energy?
Good question. Unprocessed energy is passed down. Unhealed, unconnected to energy is passed down, along with unconscious symbols and metaphors for life. That's a whole nother, that's Jung, Carl Jung, and I highly recommend people who are in their explorative journey with God and spirituality, check him out. Yeah, so energy is unprocessed energy. If I don't heal myself, I'll just pass it on to my kids. I know that. I know that for myself. My kids are going to be like, oh, I took on my dad's stuff.
So give me, what is, practically, what does that mean? What's something that if I don't heal, my kids may?
Internalized shame, if my anger,
Let's take anger.
my
Okay.
anger, that's funny. Okay.
What?
I observe when I say my anger, like it's a Freudian slip. I didn't say it by accident. So I'm like, oh, maybe there's anger to explore. Okay.
Oh, you said internalized shame, my anger. Okay,
Yeah.
right. You didn't say my internalized shame. You said
Yeah.
internalized shame and my anger.
Yeah.
Okay, so anger's a close friend of mine
Okay.
as well. Maybe not as well. Speaking of things,
Sure.
a Jungian slip.
Sure, you could use that.
So, let's say with anger. Okay, so let's say I have this, but it doesn't necessarily get expressed that often or at all around my children, right? So I would say that's actually a good example. I don't know that my children have necessarily seen me express anger. And if they did, very, very, very seldom and not directed at them. Actually, I can think of one time, but I think I could be forgiven because I was woken up. I was literally woken up abruptly. In any case, I don't think there was a pattern. There's been a pattern of it, but I would still acknowledge that there's something unresolved around anger, and not necessarily in the way that it's expressed, maybe in the way that I'm uncomfortable expressing it. So maybe more of that. So how would that get, like, what are you cautioning me, and by extension anyone listening, about me not doing the work of having a healthier relationship with anger?
Ooh. Anger is a trigger topic for people. We're getting closer to like unconscious material. Anything unconscious like spooks people out. So we speak about in Pirkei Avos that anger is bad. Anger is avodah zarah. I believe it's in Pirkei Avos. And I think that we have to relearn anger and heal anger as the healthy emotion that it is. Sometimes it's built up and we need to express it, and maybe we need to find an outlet for that. But once connected to what that anger is sourced in, and we've done some trauma work, some process work, then how do we form a healthier relationship with that anger? And that might be anger. Healthy anger is assertiveness. Assertiveness says, I need what I need. I want what I want. I know what I want. And if I get angry, it's when I need to set my boundary. Of course, anger has a space. It's there to keep people safe, to protect people, and even in the healthy way, to communicate my needs. So I can communicate my emotional needs. And if I can do that, then I probably have a healthier relationship with anger. The goal is just to heal as much as we can.
Right, and if that's not there, your argument is that will get passed down in some way to all the children, some of the children?
Yeah.
Yeah, to both.
No, sometimes certain children take on certain characteristics of us.
Right.
Now I'm going into my own thoughts. I don't know if I can
Sure.
prove that, but I see it often, and it speaks about it as well.
Yeah, I mean, we can stay with, not everything you're saying is as a therapist necessarily.
Exactly.
Right. You're an individual too. We're allowed to have thoughts. We don't.
There you go.
We don't cancel people here.
Yes. Not in this podcast.
What? Not in this one.
Okay.
Maybe the whole thing will get canceled one day. Halavai.
And then I'll be proud to have been on it.
All right. How do you translate halavai in English?
I don't know.
It's a
If only.
if only. Right, but you need like a good Yiddish if only.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So let's talk about anger more. Let's talk about anger.
Going with anger.
What? Let me get a free therapy session here.
I know.
So when you talk about it as assertiveness, is that anger?
Yeah.
Why do you say that? It doesn't come out as anger. It can be.
I'll differentiate between what we know as anger, which is really rage, which is like that core biological drive of rage, of lust, right? These are like and then what the healthy outcome of it. So at the deep sense of anger built up is rage, and unrefined anger is rage. And that's probably what the Pirkei Avos means. Rage is avodah zarah. But anger, meaning an enlightened state of consciousness, of course we have feelings, right? It's not, oh, I don't have any emotions. That's not enlightened. But that we have anger is that we know what we feel, we express it right away. And sometimes we do get angry, and sometimes we do have rage. We're not supposed to be perfect humans. But maybe I would differentiate between anger and rage.
Anger and rage. So oftentimes when someone is thinking about anger, when they're hearing the word anger, what they're really thinking about in your mind is rage. And that's what they want to keep off the table.
Yeah.
And as a byproduct of that, they end up.
Sometimes they also, just putting the whole anger thing. And if it's not their anger, if it's inherited anger, do you blame them? If the anger is my dad's anger or my grandparents' anger, it's a lot to process. It's not just my own.
Right. I've seen this in families where anger is a very, very unwelcome emotion.
Yeah.
Right. So you connect this to the same idea you shared about earlier where there isn't room for those, someone's not in an open state. There isn't room for those emotions. So anger has a bad rap.
Yeah, very much. It's dangerous. Conflict is dangerous. Difference of opinions are dangerous. It really ties back into the whole idea of psychological flexibility.
What is the survival mechanism behind taking anger and relegating it to the basement?
Well, imagine, I'm just going to go on a limb.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's out of control, then it's dangerous. They need to be like in the tribe, in the community. Community is safety, right? That we need to be part of it, blend in. Can't speak for ourselves. If someone's too strong and they're not listening to the leaders or whatever it is, then that's dangerous. Back in the day. So shut down.
Right, so at a very young age, anytime anger gets expressed.
Yeah, it's their shame, perhaps, tied to it.
Right. There was a parent coach, therapist, I don't know what, who I interviewed a little while ago. And I asked her about a barometer that she may use to distinguish a healthy family from an unhealthy one. And her answer actually surprised me, but I want to know what you thought of it. She said that a family she'll see a lot of expression, right? So there's several young kids, and one may be crying, one may be yelling, one may be, I don't know throwing a tantrum necessarily was something she said, but just in general that there is expression and that it's welcomed. Like that to her is a healthy family.
I agree.
You would agree with?
Yeah.
So you walk in here, my kids are throwing things and yelling, and it's like, wow, what an amazing family.
Like anything.
Right, too much.
Is there boundaries? Is it to the other extreme? But the idea that a child has a safe place to express how they feel, including their anger, is a healthy and needed quality for the next generation.
So as a therapist, what you're saying is walking into a home where, you can just imagine it, right? If I was writing a movie script about this family movie period. We have to look good. The guests are coming over.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That image of everyone tucked in neatly, quiet, behaving for you is like, okay, this is a train wreck waiting to happen. Future patients.
It's definitely future patients. It's definitely future clients. It's not a train wreck. I've seen they're still tucked in. They're respectable, and those are good qualities, and they're important qualities. So we just have to dig a little deeper. You can't know on the surface.
Right. Well, my point was a little bit different. Is that
the neuroticism.
The image, right? The image that we're using this to portray an image of.
That's neuroticism. That's
right. And it's actually portraying, to the trained eye, is portraying the exact opposite of what. Meaning there's more questions than answers there.
Yes.
Right. Like,
I feel like, I mean, with training and with knowledge, and you have your knowledge, you start to see the world differently. But with love, like a deeper love, or a deeper, I feel pain and I see suffering, but also see the love, or so you get both.
Can we talk about IFS a little bit? Because I feel like, so I was very heavily...
Very clinical today.
Yeah. I was very heavily involved in therapy from 2008 till 13. After that, while I continued to have a therapist, my main direction was 12-step programs.
Okay.
And I was like, I was in the 12 steps, and then I had things to support my work in the 12 steps. And I never went back to therapy as the primary tool I was using to heal, but something or someone was always in the equation. My wife and I was with a marriage therapist not long ago. It's still part of the tools, but it's not what it was for me between 2008 and 2013 as the primary way I was doing healing work. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this IFS thing kind of came out of nowhere. Did I miss it? Was it happening when I was deeply in therapy? Is it a new thing? And then the way people talk about it is with, someone left me a message earlier. It says, well, surely you know that IFS doesn't look at it that way. I'm like, okay, this is like the new terror. Like what? So I want to know what I'm dealing with.
We got to be cautious about new terrors, right? New doctrines. I have to jump on that before we get into it, because the psychology field is similar to the religious field that will take on, and then the creators of the philosophies become like religious leaders, and there's like a little bit of a doctrine there, and I'm putting it out there that I'm still working with IFS and how I feel, and exploring how I feel about the culture of IFS. And we're talking about it, okay. But the parts language, what IFS offers, a easier to understand walk into the unconscious, into what's deeper. That's the value.
Right, meaning it's a framework of, for potentially one aspect of it, which seems to be very useful, and I think why many people seem to embrace it, is that if I tell you you're a jackass, that's hard to hear. But if I tell you there's a part of you that's a jackass, okay, so now just a part of me, right? I mean, is that some of this?
Everyone should use parts language. I do believe that it's a compassionate, more honest way of looking at humans. Humans are made up of parts. On the extreme, I've worked with multi-personality. That means they don't recognize each other. And that's on the more extreme sense. But on the average
multi-personality, meaning the two parts of this person don't even know that they're parts.
They're two separate entities where the human lives their life in multiple personalities. Dissociative identity disorder is the proper clinical term.
So in one identity, they're dissociated from the other identity.
Exactly. They don't recognize or remember being in the other identities. That's and everything in psychology, there's the extreme, and then there's somewhere in the middle. And we all have multiple personalities. We're all a little crazy, right? And that's okay. Yeah, part of me is angry. part of me loves doing this, a part of me hates this person, the part of me loves them. And just even exploring that is like, and holding space as the parts as separate from us. Right? I'm not that part.
Right.
I'm not angry. A part of me is angry. So
Right. So that I love.
Yeah.
When you mentioned the culture, there's something that I seem to be hearing kind of repeatedly within it, is this idea that, like, when we have a part, it's always there. That part never goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So this you subscribe to is this part of the
So like every therapy has a belief system, a religious system behind it, a hypothesis really. And he says that the parts transform, that they never go away, but they become healed parts. So those functions of our personality that maybe we're angry, now we use them to assert and to push forward to, help people. The parts of us that were that we don't really know, they transform into inner child playful parts. We see it, so I don't have any reason to knock it.
Right. It just felt very
Didn't feel something about it.
yeah, I'm trying to place it. Maybe it kind of felt similar to 12 steps, where once an addict, always an addict, which I understand.
It's got
that,
a religious feel to it.
yeah, like an absolute.
As
right.
someone coming from a religious community, it was like that with me with hypnosis. When I did some training in hypnosis, and whenever like the big guy would come, some of them, I had this feeling in my gut, and I get feelings about when people aren't. There's mixed intentions. I actually called him out, but that's a whole nother story. But I felt that there was something off, and it's like that religious, that control part of me that's hyper attuned, just something that doesn't feel fully clean. Doesn't mean it's not helpful. Right. Is it helpful or is it not? It seems helpful. Is it all, kaddish and holy? Is anything?
Right. Okay, so you hold it with a certain.
Take it for what it's worth.
Right.
If it's helpful, same with anything.
Right.
Is it helpful? Is belief in God, is it helping you? This is more helpful than not. All right.
Okay, so let's go there. Let's go
there. Yeah.
Let's go to that one. In terms of, is it helpful? So I understand it certainly with IFS, but to go there with religion, meaning is there to say there's a religious doctrine, right? Like there is behind everything, right? And everyone speaks in this way. It doesn't matter the discipline that one gets behind. And I there's room for that, meaning that when I meet someone who's standing behind a certain practice, like the way that's going to move forward is for someone to believe this is the thing.
Oh, you're saying like in order to do EMDR well, this is it.
Otherwise, they wouldn't necessarily have the passion, and for them, it is it, right? Otherwise, EMDR wouldn't exist if someone didn't say, "I'm going to buck all." There was a lot of criticism against EMDR. There was a lot of, "Hey, this is, total, I don't know, crackery, and it doesn't work in. There's no place for this within a therapeutic setting." And then for a traditional trained therapist who's gone for years to get a license to study EMDR, use it. There was an uphill battle at the beginning for that, but someone to say, no, this is what's going to save the world and heal trauma. And it helped me. I mean, I used EMDR a lot, and early on, and I'm grateful for it. I didn't finish all my work when with EMDR. Certainly, there was plenty of trauma that the other tools had to
that helped you,
right. Had to get to, but it did help. But I understand the role of the creator, the founder, the person behind that. Meaning, I believe that the Jews should feel they're the chosen people, and I believe that those who are not should also feel they are the chosen people.
Gotcha. Specialness, chosenness. I guess like we have to be fully in whatever we're doing, and also have like a little bit of like a healthy, I don't know, skeptic, but like throughout all my experience, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but like I've always been like, okay, but like let me just. Well, I'm always questioning.
Right.
This is helping. It's helping until I find something that's more helpful. Always seeking to go to the next thing.
I think it's a necessary trait for someone who likes to learn, because if you are the type of person who likes to learn, but every new piece of information can become a religion, it's very dangerous. So I think it goes kind of hand in hand,
Yeah.
where, yeah, I'll knock on new doors. I'm comfortable, but don't expect me to become your biggest fan just because I walked in the door.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to hear you out. And I find that oftentimes people who are very rigidly opposed to new ideas, they're most likely to get swept up in this fully. Like it kind of goes hand in hand. So
Yeah. That someone who jumps from one, I mean, I don't want to like label, but saying like we're religious, then very not, and then we go back to fully. We usually want to find some balance with whatever it is that we're working through, whether it's anything psychologically, religiously.
Right. No, it's not to say that over time we can't be, because I put myself in that category as well, that I can't be fully convinced of something, that I can't be moved in that direction, that I'm pretty bought into something, but it's not going to be just because I got some benefit here. So here I am. Meaning I didn't need to be crazily convinced to walk into the 12 steps. But at the same point in time, I loved reading books on addiction from anti-12 steppers. And I agreed with a lot of their criticism often, but I still went to the 12 steps. It wasn't this.
Our religious part loves it. The religious, maybe it's traumatized, maybe it's not. Our religious part, if we're using parts, loves the whatever. Yeah, I found it. We found it. Praise the Lord.
So let's talk about this religious part. That's where I was going. So thank you.
And we might explore that. That's something passed down generationally. That we are seeking truth. We're seeking the truth, and it's complicated because consciously we're growing, right? So that truth, that whole like religious part that we inherited it has to change. It has to evolve. So there has to be some sort of like more nuance into what that even means. Do we have to let go of like our religiousness? I don't know. But I do know that part of us loves it, and then another part realizes that, like, well, slow down.
Right.
Let's not jump. Psychology is not the next religion. Someone asked Jung, did you create a new religion? It's like, no, I didn't create a religion. I'm just trying to help people. So
maybe that's his religion.
His religion?
Helping people.
he speaks about religion a lot, and speaks about how Chassidus even, he says that everything he wrote was from the Maggid of Mezrich.
Who's that?
Jung.
Oh, really?
I just saw it. I read it 2 weeks ago.
Is that right? Very neat.
So Chassidus has metaphors for psychology, and it's all the traditions. He believes it's all speaking to the unconscious. Everything, all religious traditions, it's all symbolic of going deeper, of the God within, of the unconscious within, and exploring ourselves deeper. And that the light of Chassidus and all the metaphors in Chassidus is speaking about psychological, the psyche. So,
saying that the worlds, let's say Atzilus, Bria, Yetzias, is like internal psyche.
Yeah,
worlds.
I mean, it's even easier to understand with Chabad or Chagas. Cognitive behavioral therapy is like Chabad, is cognitive, and Chagas is more EMDR.
Somatic.
Somatic is more Chagas. And Lubavitch seems to be drawn to Chagas, or to both. So I'm saying you can find it. I'm not particularly looking or not, but I mean, if it's helpful for you, if it helps you.
Right. So when you said earlier that if God is helpful for you, if believing in God is helpful for you, good. If not, not. So what does that mean, helpful?
My personal belief is that things that you ascribe your life to should be helping you, and should be helping you grow, and helping you to dig deeper within, and be and seek some sort of truth. help you face the afterworld, face death with peace, give you less anxiety. So if God is that for you, great. And spirituality, great. And in fact, spirituality is, I believe, is part of psychology. But religion depends on a lot of factors. What that means. What does religion mean to you?
So, in your worldview, if someone is, if you said a few examples,
Yeah.
but let's take one. It's
Sure.
making me feel more comfortable preparing for the afterlife or the
Mhm.
idea of death. It gives me
Sure.
more peace. So there are certainly concepts about God that have been shared with me that make that more comforting. And there are some that make it much less comforting.
Oh, yeah. How you, heaven, hell
Exactly.
versus
Yes.
we're all going to go, connect to something higher.
But is that the switch point? Meaning, if you're saying helpful to you, what is helpful? What does the word helpful mean? How do I know someone is?
I probably actually meant spiritually aligned. Spiritually aligned means that uh, is more connected to love, is more connected, like from a spirituality perspective, separate from religion,
Yes.
is probably what I'm speaking to. Is it more helpful? Is it helping me to connect to my spirituality? Is it helping me connect to others, to myself? Is it helping me to sleep well at night and not have nightmares? To not have that I can embrace the scary things and I'll be okay. So the spirituality is probably what I'm talking about when I say helpful.
So where religion is often used to make separate categories between people, right? Sometimes
It
most
can
strongly
be.
along, right?
Yeah.
As I said, it's often used, but okay, it can be. Is also I'm okay with that terminology. So it can be used for that.
I'm
So
politically correct.
so you would consider that unhelpful.
Labels and categories.
Where I don't say labels and categories, but where adopting that label and category is causing someone to feel separate from someone else, right? Which is the opposite of spirituality, right? Often the spiritual
Yeah, yeah.
worldview, the oneness, the connectedness, the all part of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes a religious doctrine or religious ideas can make someone believe something very different than that spiritual concept.
Yeah.
So that would be an example of something you call unhelpful.
It tells me that something is off. Is it the teacher? Is it the way it's being taught? Is it the receiver? We often blame the receiver, right? The student, whatever. But where something's off, right? It should be truth. If it's truth and we believe it's truth, then shouldn't it align? Shouldn't it be helpful? What's so weird that it wouldn't be? So for me, it's like, well, let me see. Is there truth here? It hurts me so much. A friend of mine, I'll quote him, Shlomi Cohen, also a psychotherapist. And he said, the most painful thing is when you're learning something true, but it's being taught to you either by people that don't get the truth, they're teaching the falseness, or they're not getting the truth to you. You're like sitting there, like learning all this amazing stuff potentially, but it ain't getting to it's not being taught in a truthful way. How sad. It's got to have some truth. All cultures have mythologies that are helpful to us. So if people aren't getting it, what's wrong, right? It doesn't mean there's something wrong with the religion. There's something wrong with what we're doing.
Right, understood. But so let's say, I don't know, the Rebbe had a concept, right? Hamaisa Hu'ikar, right? The action is the main thing. Meaning there's some value in, I don't know, putting on tefillin every day, whether it brings you separateness or not separateness. Like, I don't care, just do this thing. That's what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you make of that?
I would take it for what it's worth. The action, when we do an action, whatever it is, if we're in depression and we take an action, it inspires us to do more. It impacts how we feel.
But you're saying something. You're saying that
whatever.
it's possible.
It's helpful, and it's like a cognitive behavioral kind of approach.
Well, it could be, but let's say like that idea of a mitzvah having some sort of value independent of intention, independent of
Oh, yeah.
whether it's bringing goodness into one's life.
Gotcha, yeah.
Obviously. So
Yeah, that's where you're hitting
Yes.
a soft spot, right? Like, now what? So should one just practice disconnected from self? Just shake the lulav. You can be thinking about whatever. I don't know. Is it helping them?
that's what I'm saying. So how does this jive with your?
Well, they would argue that it does inspire something at a spiritual level. That there's some, I might say, the metaphor of a lulav connects to an unconscious spiritual process for them that brings them to a heightened sense of spirituality. Do we know what the harvest, why that helps somebody connect? We don't know. But our tradition tells us that certain symbols help people connect.
But in fact, you may be seeing the opposite.
But in fact, what?
In fact, you may be seeing the opposite.
And how they, in this random person that does this mitzvah, or by...
I was overhearing a dialogue not long ago of two people debating of whether it would be appropriate on, let's say, a Jewish holiday or the Sabbath to have non-Jewish guests at a table.
Okay.
Right? So this would be an example of a practice that would create some sort of separateness for that person. Meaning there's two people in this discussion. For one person that are saying, hey, if I'm practicing this Jewish holiday, then there should not be, like, I shouldn't share this with non-Jews, right? So that's when I'm hearing this, and be the same thing for you, this practice is creating a certain separateness. It's almost anti-spiritual for this person.
Anti-spiritual,
Okay.
yeah.
So according to your perspective, the way I'm understanding it, it's unhelpful for this person. We may want to think why they're doing that. According to my understanding of the Rebbe's approach, Hamaiso Iker, the main thing is to do the thing. Then just do the thing of keeping the Sabbath or the Yom Tov holidays, despite the fact that it's obviously creating a separateness in this person's reality. And obviously, I'm not talking about a situation where someone doesn't, like, just out there and saying, okay, let me invite non-Jews to my house. I'm talking about someone who maybe has a close friend who's a non-Jew and saying that it would be more meaningful to my Sabbath if they were here, and someone else saying, hey, how could that be?
I mean,
there's no room for that, meaning in their mind, their practice has created a separateness between them and others. That's what I mean to say. So do you see your perspective, what you're sharing, as being different than what the Rebbe might say about that same situation?
Probably not. Ironically, I don't speak for the Rebbe, and I don't. But I'm gonna assume that if truth was there, then I wouldn't want to take one line of Kabbalah's all, right? That just do whatever is told to you. That sounds very toxic. But if you really understand Kabbalah's all, then you'll understand that maybe there's certain aspects to Emunah or certain aspects to Bitachon. And Maisa Iker is speaking about, sometimes the therapist says to the client, you just have to get out of the house, or you just need to go on a walk. We're not going to get into the deep existential crisis that you have. It's also true. So to get to the specific point about the Shabbos table, what are you picking on? You're picking on one thing that the Rebbe said, or one thing that religion points to? Well, I'll point to the fact that religion has many other aspects that we don't really focus on. We seem to just focus on the Maisa, the doing,
Right.
Do this, be this. And it's like, come on. Like, is that really going to work for the next generation? Is that really? And I don't mean next generation like I'm whatever. It's like, it's just not, it's not realistic. People need to understand why. There needs to be a depth and a nuance to it. And yeah, so...
Okay, no, I accept your answer. It's a good answer.
All right.
And in terms of two ways, one, the Kabbalah Soul way, and the second is, oftentimes when someone will say, oh, it's about doing Torah mitzvahs, right? Let's say. Okay, so which mitzvah are you talking about? is it treating someone else nicely, or is it the practice of wrapping straps around your hand? Like, which mitzvah are we talking about? Because, like you're saying, religion touches on many, many, many different aspects, and oftentimes
We just attach to
right, we attach to one thing.
whatever we want.
Right, we attach to this one thing. Right, Kabbalah Sol is an interesting one because Kabbalah Sol, which would mean, I guess, accepting the yoke, right, is
Literally.
a surrender of sorts, like
Yeah.
just surrender to it. It was often communicated, I know, to me as a child, in that I should surrender to the teacher.
Mhm.
Right? But that's not what it meant.
I hope not.
That's not what it meant. Meaning the instruction was to surrender to God.
To God.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was often distorted. So you're saying it's possible, right, without the context that I may be saying, oh, Hamaiso Iker. Okay, that's one in a certain, I may have said something like that too, but it wasn't it wasn't the only commandment.
Yeah. Yeah.
There wasn't a single commandment.
It's very religious of us to be
Yes.
like, the Rebbe said this, and how could he say this? We're almost being religious back to him. We're like
Right.
saying that, the Rebbe, you're whatever. So, yeah.
Right. No, my question was coming from a place of, are you saying we're in disagreement? Or are you saying, like, no, there's many, many things this person
Right,
said,
right.
and let's take it.
Totally.
Right. Because the truth of the matter is that when you talk about, I think about this a lot, is that you have human life. And it says, according to Judaism, which is not the same in all religions, there are certain religions which do not value the individual human life.
Mm-hmm.
Judaism seems to try to balance both the importance of the community and the importance of religion. And in individual life, it says there's only three things more important than human life.
Oh, okay.
Right. Not killing someone else, forbidden relations, and avodah zarah, which
The Gemara, right?
right, we don't know what that means yet, avodah zarah, but that maybe you do. I don't
They
know.
said it says in I think in Gemara somewhere that avodah zarah was transferred to money,
I
so
believe
that the taiva of the desire for avodah zarah was put into money.
Right. Right. You also said like anger is avodah zarah, meaning the whole concept of avodah zarah is
It's somewhat to be explored.
right.
Yeah.
Is somewhat foreign to us, ironically.
It's the unconscious.
In any event, the Hamaiso Iker was not one of those things that are more important than human life. That was my point.
Yeah, exactly. Human life, human emotional life. It doesn't always have to be literally the physical life.
Right. And this, I actually, I once asked this question to a rabbi.
Oh.
And I said, when we talk about this human life, that it's more valuable than anything else. And I think the context was something about Shabbos. But it may not have been. I'm not saying a halacha.
Right.
And his answer was pretty definitive, is that if someone's struggling with depression or anxiety or something, like that's robbing a human of their quality of life, of their life, like that would fall under the same umbrella as human life. It doesn't literally have to be the difference between alive and dead forever. There's, there are
Their
many
life source.
Yeah, or it could.
Yeah.
We'll use the analogy of, let's say, someone who was had a really rough child. Their childhood was robbed of them, right? This human did not have normal life, or you said, a term used was a developmentally inappropriate.
Yeah, underdeveloped, sure.
Correct. But no, I mean, taking something on at a time of their life that they shouldn't.
Okay.
Right? So meaning that child didn't have a childhood. When you talk about like a human life, like they were robbed of aspects of their human life. The fact that as a 30-year-old, they're still a living 30-year-old, and that process in childhood didn't kill them forever, kill them as a human being. It's still, they were robbed of their childhood. Yeah. And it's a term we'll use. We'll use it like they did not live a childhood.
There's grief, there's loss.
So for you, your bedrock kind of principle is this supportive and helpful towards me being a better person?
Towards me being a healthy, happy, functional person on a deep level.
So this almost sounds like derech eretz kadmon laTorah.
Maybe.
Right.
Maybe.
For those who may.
Maybe what derech eretz kadmon laTorah means for this generation versus then it just meant, listen, derech eretz, do what you're supposed to do. And now derech eretz means live a way of depth or live a way of introspection. It's like the words could take on new meanings. It's not that we're trying to make them new. It's just the reality, right? The Chassidus came, the Alter Rebbe came, all these generations came to explain what these things meant. And now it's a little bit of, we say, a time of darkness. We don't have an official Rebbe, we don't have an official, but we have teachers, but it seems like there's darkness in the time when there's the most light at the same time.
So what do you mean by the light and what do you mean by the darkness?
Religiously, it's confusing. Post Gimel Tammuz for Chabad
Right.
people, and just in general, we have a certain way that we've always been taught. Post World War II, we kind of stayed with that kind of like religious dogma of do it this way, be it this way, and that almost feels like darkness, like we're losing religion to the light, to this higher level of consciousness. That we need religion to catch up to this level of consciousness that the world has, that our children are going to have. That we need to adapt. We need to go within, because that's it. I mean, look, Freud, all these people came 100 years ago. We ain't going back. It's not going back.
Right.
I wish for the good old days. Nothing is going back. It's only going forward. And humans need to evolve and change and grow. And how do we adopt that when the religious leaders don't look like they always did? And that's hard. The darkness is from a spirituality, religious perspective, as a Jewish religious person. Like,
Oh, so you think that specifically within the Jewish community right now is a time of darkness?
maybe.
In the sense there isn't an obvious leader, there isn't an obvious direction.
Yeah.
The leaders have traditionally done the job of kind of help us navigate.
Clarifying,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, this was appropriate in this time. Now we're in a different time, and this is how we're staying true to our ancient heritage, but still looking at the reality in front of us.
Like, who's the leaders? Is it the rabbis? Are the psychologists the leaders now?
Right.
Like, that's not our role per se. We're here to, explore, go deep. But I'm curious about that. Like, who becomes humans need leadership, but the leadership seems stuck in World War II.
So, but then we'd have to say that, like, this too is by design, and this is part. Like, this is
Yeah. Okay.
right. Meaning
okay.
the moment now.
the emunah or the
Right. The moment now is for a different type of reality, which is no leader.
Yeah, a collective
Right.
unconscious where the individual is prioritized over the mind submissive to the leader, where all of the unconscious is to the leader. Now it's all a collective unconscious where the self is the most important thing, not in an egotistical way, but I could find godliness and leadership and everything within.
That feels right. Like, it feels like you just said something like
Okay. God is within.
what?
God
No,
is
that
a
may
concept
be kind of the call of the hour. We're almost saying that, for so long there was the opportunity to point towards a leader and somehow know that they were providing the right direction for us. And while there was a place for that, that's not the place now. That's not. And
That's
if we
the
don't
challenge.
have it, in absence of that, where do we find it? And the only way we can be sure is within.
The Rebbe said, I'm giving it over to you. I do believe the Rebbe, he was that transmission of whatever this next level of consciousness was. And he says, I'm not going to speak for the Rebbe, but he says, I'm giving it over to you, to the Chassidim. And that sounds very religious. But like from like a more broad perspective, it's you guys. We can't just look towards a leader. I like what you're saying. I'm agreeing with it as we're
And
talking.
it's not only happening within Chabad, right? If we look at,
Yeah.
let's say politically, right? Regardless of which side one is on, I think we both would agree, and most people would agree, that the level of power and dignity and respect that the office of the President of the United States once held, it does not have that.
You're saying just naturally, like
It
as
doesn't-
the level in society where we're at. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we do not have a leader in the sense not calling into question them specifically. What I'm saying is that concept almost as a leader of the country just does not exist. Even if someone who was the most amazing leader were to step forward, like had all the best leadership qualities of any president in the history of the United States, that title, the President of the United States, doesn't carry the gravitas that it did even 10 and certainly not 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, meaning that this vacuum of leadership, so to speak, where we don't have that same
idealism.
Yes, adoration
Yeah.
for the leader. Even if we didn't agree, we would say, hey, but he is the leader and we have to, right? If you don't respect him, respect the office. Like that just doesn't seem to have that today. So if we're seeing this in many different ways and we believe that the world is, kind of carefully constructed and orchestrated, if that is our belief, then this is the call of the hour is, I guess, to go within and find that space.
Yeah, we always seeked outwards. We're seeking maybe a lack of self-love. I don't know. It's saying we're seeking towards a collective, but now it's like we can find that within a certain sense of real self-love, a real sense of real unity within ourselves.
Right, because even it's clear, even in talking to you, that in trying to find that place of whether you're doing right or wrong, there's no one you're pointing to. Right, you're pointing within.
The unconscious power,
Yes.
within, yeah.
Yes.
The
But-
godly spirit, whatever you want to call
Meaning
it.
the way you're going to find that answer is not by knocking on someone else's door. It's
Not
by
through
going,
a therapist.
What?
Not that it's not through a therapist, but the therapist isn't going to give you the right or wrong.
Right. But I'm saying in your case.
Yeah.
In your case, you're not saying is Jung sounds to me, when you said his name, that you held a tremendous amount of respect for him. The Rebbe, when you said his name, it sounds like you hold a tremendous amount of respect for him. But there's no door for you to knock on and say, please give me the direction for my life, that you're going to have to find within. And is this helpful for you in your own spiritual development or not? That's the question. And only you can answer that.
Only you can answer that. You can find it in the teachings. You can find it within other,
You get a lot of help.
Yeah, mentorship, teachings, the Rebbe's teachings, Young's teachings, all these things that we can take and integrate.
But the final answer for you is how it feels in the belly.
For me, I feel different spots in my stomach.
Right.
I can actually feel different parts come up, with people and stuff.
And if it's clear,
Then we're good.
then you're good.
Then we're good.
That's right. So meaning that's just another way of saying the same thing. So maybe that's what needs to happen now. There is no leader. No one's coming to save us. Like each of us, it's been handed to us. Each of us need to find that power source within.
That sits right. I'm sure that won't sit right with somebody. Yeah. But that's a really interesting take.
Right.
And I think that.
Yeah, I haven't expressed this before.
Yeah.
We're having a
Yeah.
conversation and there happens to be a microphone in front of us.
Exactly.
It's not. This wasn't a thought I had or expressed, but as I'm asking you questions and talking about these things, is maybe this is it. Maybe this is what it's been waiting for. And you kind of, I was sitting with a guest earlier today, and he had mentioned about the rabbis and the rabbis and the rabbis, not in that way, but kind of, it felt like there was a certain expectation he had of the rabbis doing more for the community. Mm. And I didn't feel it appropriate to challenge him in the moment, so I let it go. But what I was thinking was, come on, the rabbis, like, what power do they have? What could they do? It's actually, every single one of us has as much power as the next.
That's what we're teaching our children.
There is no one who's, I've spoken to many rabbis. They say, I'd love to do this. I don't have the power. No one listens to me when I talk. My wife and kids don't listen.
The power's gone anyway.
Right.
You might stop with the fake powers and control and agendas. Just give it up.
Right. It doesn't exist.
Heal.
And it probably did at a time, right? There was a time.
Jung speaks about Nazi Germany.
The what?
He studied Hitler. He met Hitler. And he studied Nazi Germany. And he spoke about this collective group of people transferring their unconscious to Hitler. That he was like a walking country. He wasn't a human. So this idea of a leadership like a leader literally takes on the unconscious of others, but to the lack of the people. And this is more of a sound like a trippy concept, but the idea that we are our own people now. I love that. Like that we're not necessarily followers. We're our own leaders. I love that idea, and that can save us from repeating history, from groupthink, from all these ideas where humans do, crazy things.
Right.
Maybe this will actually help us not to do that.
I would think so. I mean, the last 100 years are littered with examples of people who've been able to step into that role, much to the dismay of many of the other ones of us.
From those in power?
Correct.
Yeah.
Meaning this mistake of giving our power away to the wrong person has proven to be...
It's complicated. You're getting into systems, you're getting into organizations, school systems. It's a whole, like, who's in charge? Someone needs to be in charge. What are you gonna? So it's still like a spiritual concept, and how are you going to integrate it into our life? It starts with the individual. It starts with those in power doing their own work, their own healing. And that's where we can start, with the individual. We always say we have to start with the community. We need to heal the community. What's the expression? I don't remember. Is it the Rabbi of Kotsk or something like it?
Yeah, first I tried to heal the world, and then I tried to heal my country, then I tried to heal my community.
If there was
family.
one person that could actually, like, that wisdom would transmit. And I somehow believe that, like, as much as my work is called towards, like, communal stuff, and I've been in schools, but, like, if I ever lost that one-on-one individual work, it would be a hard one to, like, stop practicing, one-on-one, let's say. Maybe it would be...
By one-on-one, do you mean you with yourself, or you
That's
with...
what I was just thinking. No, it's great as we're talking that perhaps I can let that go.
You can't what?
I can let that go.
Right. The one-on-one is...
Yeah, because it's really with myself.
Yeah, who is it who said... Yocheved Saidoff, who I interviewed not long ago, he published not long ago, she said, I've created the perfect storm of problems in order to get the perfect teaching for myself. Like Oh,
that's wonderful. Yeah.
So it's like all of this kind of outside reality that we create just in order to learn, like, just the right lesson.
We do all sorts of stuff just to, like, tell ourselves, teach ourselves one little message.
Right.
Well, humans do crazy things to just grapple with what they haven't connected to.
Right. But it's a lot of that also being, deeply unconscious, not understanding that we're doing that, but thinking...
Unconscious means that we have no idea that we feel or believe that. That's what unconscious means. It's a really important concept. I could yell it into the microphone. There's this idea that there's an unconscious. That means thoughts, beliefs, patterns that you have no connection to until you do some internal work.
And then they're not unconscious anymore.
And then they're no longer unconscious. And you might have a core belief that shocks you. You might always feel like, I don't really have good self-esteem or something. But you may never know that you have, like, some crazy but really intense belief that, like, I'm gonna be hurt, right? Or when I'm in a certain, and that causes me to do X, or all sorts of, like, weird stuff that the unconscious does in our body.
Right. I encountered one recently. I think I shared a little bit on the podcast, which I could not believe I held, and was probably the single biggest impediment to my marriage. And since I've spoken about this and shifted this, it's my marriage is completely different. And I know my wife for 10 years. And it was that if I'm hurt twice in the same way, I am a fool. That's it. That's simple.
Oh, it's very specific.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's just...
It's uniquely you.
Yeah. If I'm hurt twice in the same way, I'm a fool. And now it's, if I'm hurt twice in the same way, I'm in love.
I'm in love.
I'm in love.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Right. Meaning, and that's something that I can extend to the whole world. Like, it's okay to get hurt. And that was something that, like, that was a belief. It's not okay to get hurt. Almost like I won't survive getting hurt.
Yeah, I won't survive.
I won't survive getting hurt.
Yeah.
Like, if I want to take it to a deeper level. And then the other stuff around being a fool and, kind of how I've...
Yeah, like at that core, like, I won't survive. If I feel the grief, I will die.
That's the feeling, yeah.
For grief, like avoidance of grief, or if I like, I will, it's really intense at the core. And it's like, really? But it's
Right.
okay.
So, meaning
Embrace
this,
it, love it, and feel it, and do it in a safe way.
right? So this case, this idea, I had no idea I believed this. I could not have articulated it. As soon as it was shown to me, I felt like I was kicked in the head.
Oh,
And
it's like,
yeah,
yeah,
like
that happens
But it was true.
too.
Yeah, I was like, wow, that is literally the way I'm living. But it was driving so many of my interactions, and then just bringing it from the unconscious to the conscious. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and there's many ways to do that, and therapy is one way. I know you're speaking about plant medicine and all sorts of.
Okay, you went there first, so
Just because you liked it, I saw that you talked about it.
I talk about what's going on in my life and the tools that I've. That one is getting a little bit of attention now.
Yeah.
Because there's some confusion, or sexual abuse used to get a lot of the same kind of.
Yeah,
I'm not
new.
right.
It's new, it's scary, and it touches on the unconscious.
Yes.
Any new therapy always freaks people out. Any new healing modality is going to freak people out.
Right. I'm not talking about anything more than like my experience, my life, my story, and so tools that may or may not be impacting that are impacting myself.
Yeah.
And there are certain ones that kind of get like I did these two. I did a 3-part conversation with YY Jacobson. We've only had YY. We've only held 2 of them so far.
Okay.
And the 2 areas that got the most kind of, we spoke on many different subjects, but there were 2. It's like you're talking about that was psychedelics and homosexuality. Those were 2 that just kind of, it was like
I wonder
touched an electric fence. So you mentioned plant medicines. Do you have a thought on it, perspective, questions, answers?
My wife would just like that I talked about it. She recently did a plant medicine and loved it, and
Nice.
I'm a believer.
You're a believer.
I haven't personally done plant medicine. I do things in the way that I do them. I like to learn about things a lot and go in the linear, and then eventually have to just jump off the cliff.
Right.
And so it's my next thing. If I have the right opportunity, I'm open to it. I'm curious. Isn't that the point of what I do? We're supposed to be curious and explorative and not stuck in some one thing. So, yeah, if it's helping people and therapists are a lot of people are about it. So
yeah, I think it was Terrence McKenna or Dennis McKenna said, that was his. People would. He was obviously one of the big proponents of it early on.
Yeah.
Terrence McKenna, I think it was who said this,
Okay.
and when there were not many people who were supportive of it. He was one of the first on the forefront of this. He made famous the heroic dose of psilocybin mushrooms, where he's like, every single person should take 5 grams psilocybin mushrooms inside, in a dark room, just you with the mushrooms, and no music, no lights, no nothing, just you alone with your thoughts. On that, he called the heroic dose. Anyway, so he would tell people, instead of debating it, just do it. Take a 15-minute DMT experience and see what happens, and then we'll talk. You tell me what you think. Why does there have to be so much resistance? Obviously, I'm not suggesting anything that flippant, because there are many.
Well, there's parts. My parts say, "Yo, that's dangerous." Yo, that
right.
Our parts come up, and that they don't want to do that.
Right, and I wouldn't. I'm certainly not that flippant with it. I think it's we're going in with the power tools for sure.
Yes.
And
going all in.
Yeah.
I feel that with trauma work. We're going in. Make sure it's a safe space and that the people have. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me also, it's new, relatively new, about 4 years on this path with plant medicines, which by some may be considered a long time, because a lot of people are getting into it recently, but it's certainly new for something this massive.
Yes, it's new.
To say it's very new.
But it's since the beginning of time, anything.
No, I'm saying for me, my interactions with it, it's about 4 years. And where was I going with that thought? And I'm evolving in my thought, thoughts of it. I'm seeing people who go into it, how it affects them, which ones have a positive effect, which ones don't. And one thing I've certainly come to is that someone who's choosing to go on this path should know that it's coming from themselves. That any sort of peer pressure or anything is extremely unhelpful for it, because at some point in time during that, it's highly likely, it may not be the first experience, it may be the 10th, but at some point in time, someone is most likely to come face to face with something super, super, super intense and difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is going to be, why am I here? Why am I here? Like, why did I subject myself to this experience? And I interviewed Dr. Matthew Johnson, who's head of psychedelics and consciousness at Johns Hopkins University.
Cool.
And he did a lot of the studies around psilocybin that are becoming famous now. He led a lot of those studies. And a lot of them were done with soldiers suffering from PTSD. So he said, as something I tell every single person who's coming into a psilocybin mushroom journey, he said, I say it, and it's still not understood by them when I say it for some reason, but I say it anyway. He said, is that I've treated soldiers who've been in Afghanistan, who've lost friends, who've been through horrible parts of war, and they've done psilocybin mushrooms, and they've said that the most intense experience of their life is no longer what happened in Afghanistan. It's psilocybin mushrooms. So at some point in time, someone is likely to come face to face with that kind of reality under the experience. And if the reason is because my wife pressured me into it, they're going to hate their wife in that moment.
Right.
But if the reason is that I decided I want to do something to be a better dad, I want to end generational trauma, I want to, even if I'm really freaking curious about what this thing is, but I am really curious about it, then that's why I'm here.
Cool. I like that.
So that's certainly one thing that, so the
I'll
reason
take
I
that.
said that is because when I spoke about Terrence McKenna and just saying, hey, everyone should do this, just try 15 minutes and see what happens. Easy. I've seen it open things up for people that they got to be ready to deal with.
Yeah, just like anything, once you go in, there's no turning back.
Exactly. You can't unsee something.
You can't unsee something.
You can't unsee something. It's a very difficult. That's a very difficult thing. But okay, that's nice that you have a positive reference point.
Yeah.
For it.
I'm open. It's probably the future. Done in probably a controlled. There'll be more evidence and how to do it in the safest way and all those things. But I'm assuming that that's the next thing.
Right. And I was talking to someone who said that, when there's more evidence for it than everything else, then, they'll come on board and they want research. I said, okay, I'm comfortable being part of the research class.
Yeah.
Right. Like what I've seen so far, meaning someone has to do that. There's
Someone's
no
got to
evidence.
be the research participant. Okay.
Exactly. So I'm comfortable being part of.
I don't know if I'm a big research participant, but I'm also open to not everything that can be tracked is going to be helpful. There's things that can't be tracked. Okay.
Yes.
There's certain things that can't be proven. Okay. Certain things around spirituality, all these things that can't be evidence-based. We do whatever we can to help us feel safe. And I'm all about evidence-based and all that.
100%. Yeah.
And we can't
No,
quantify and scientify.
No, hopefully over
everything.
time they get that answer, more and more. I wonder about it, which is something I just shared now, which is, okay, am I seeing some patterns in the people who seem to have very good positive outcomes from these experiences and those that don't? I want to say I don't know that I have anyone off the top that had a horribly negative experience.
Personality traits or tendencies or
or this one I mentioned is certainly one of them.
Yeah.
Going in-
intention.
Going in for your own reasons and not for any of the peer pressure associated with it. Okay. But there's no question is feeling safe when you're in that space is paramount. So whatever it takes for someone to get there, whether, if it's the research and the evidence and a clinician and someone with 4 letters after their name, like if that's what it takes in order for you to feel safe, truly safe, the more safe you feel, the deeper you can go, the more. But I'll tell you one thing that was neat from my conversation with Matthew Johnson is he mentioned that, so they've done their best to measure mystical experience, which doesn't always happen on psychedelics, but it sometimes does, often does. And he said, so on this, however they graded it, did you interact with an unknown spirit, or did you feel like you were experiencing something that felt divine, or however they asked the questions, but some sort of measure of it. When they quantified it, the more mystical experience, the more long-term beneficial, right? So they were coming in dealing with PTSD or depression or anxiety, and the more mystical, the more long-term beneficial. Totally. Very, very interesting correlation.
I think so, right? I think anything that has an impact on our soul is going to last. If I can make somebody feel something,
Right.
that's
At
going to,
that very, very deep level, right? That.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. So that soul connection, you feel it in all sorts of weird ways. Anything that helps us tap deeper. I said I found it in hypnosis. Like, I don't practice hypnosis as a clinician, but I was trained in it, and just letting go of my things within that process of being hypnotized
Right.
is almost similar to that. There's
That surrender must be.
It's more, yeah, it's more like that. It's not like the medicine just says go. You're going with the medicine, but
Well,
this
you
is a
can. Many people do resist.
yeah, so I
successfully.
could see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, first, it took me the whole training to let go of the resistance and be open to the healing. And it feels like that with every
Yes.
with every deep work. Some more than others, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd like to kind of touch on one more thing and then maybe
Sure.
wrap up the conversation. So you seem to be making not a distinction, but pointing out a divide between where religion kind of currently is and what's happening with kind of spiritual enlightenment in this moment, and suggesting that maybe religion has to shift in some way and come into the light. Is that what was I understanding it correctly?
Yeah, and maybe I would even use consciousness as a better word than spirituality, but like similar, that consciousness is evolving, so religion has to match the level of consciousness. You may use the word spirituality. Yes. I'm using.
Okay, so consciousness is evolving. Your evidence for that is what?
Just the insight that people seem to have with each generation. The younger kids have consciousness. They're just more intelligent, more emotionally mature, and more emotionally intelligent. They see things as they are. They're evolving as humans into deeper levels. So consciousness is awareness.
Doesn't the Gemara say something? The Talmud says something that in the times before Messiah, the children will teach the parents, or something to this effect.
I don't know, but if it does, that makes sense because that's where we're at. I mean,
is this different? It feels different, right? Meaning it in.
I think this is a very unique time in history.
Right. It does feel like there's a quality of children pulling their parents in a direction, maybe when for generations, I don't know, I wasn't there in a conscious way, where parents were direct, kind of, here's the parents, here's their home, and then the kids stayed there, and then the grandkids stayed there, and until the parents died, they were kind of the patriarch and matriarch of the family, and now
I wonder
it seems maybe to go in the reverse. Children move to a new place, drag the parents to go with them.
Oh, that's for sure. And I might add that parents are open to learning from their children.
Mm.
That's more. I'm not saying parents didn't do that in the past, but the learning within self, we're going deeper. If we go deep enough, maybe we'll catch our children's level of depth.
Right.
If we're lucky.
Yeah, some of what I was thinking about when I was saying that is me.
Yeah, is that?
No, is me as parent.
Okay.
Not only me as child, right? Me as parent, and seeing the way that, and certainly psychedelics has helped a lot with that, is seeing the way that there's this underlying message that every single one of my children are communicating to me. And could I be open enough to receive that? And when I do, okay, now we're on to the next lesson.
The next lesson. The lessons keep coming, and what we know to be truth it won't be the truth for the next generation. Right. And as long as we're okay with that, and that what we're speaking about is one level of consciousness today, and that in 30 years we'll have a deeper level of awareness and understanding. If we're okay with that and we can settle with that, then I think we'll be okay.
Are you familiar with the work of David Hawkins?
Sounds very familiar.
He wrote, the book I'm reading recently is Power versus Force.
Okay.
But he developed something called the map of consciousness. So the way he kind of grades it, and I'm just getting familiar with his work now.
Sure.
It was actually very recently. It was on a podcast. I was interviewed by Gedaliah Fenster, and he mentioned the name David Hawkins. I'm like, that's like the third time I'm hearing this guy's name in the past week.
Yeah, it's always like that. And
Yeah.
you're like,
Let me start reading his work. So I'm certainly a novice. I'm halfway through his first book that I'm reading. I've watched a little bit of his talks online, but he developed something called the map of consciousness, where he claims to have measured different emotions and graded them on a scale of 0 to 1,000. Or let's say emotions. Let's call it states of beings.
Okay.
Measure them on a scale of 0 to 1,000, and in this scale, like quantified them, somehow scientifically quantified. What is the energetic pull of this? But then, most importantly, so the lowest part of the scale are those which are non-life affirming states of beings, and the highest are the most life affirming states of beings. So actually, as he goes through this, the reason you get comfortable with it is because when he says things like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Like, it's not, when I say the most life affirming state, you may even think of it, but as soon as I say, like, we all know that shame has like the lowest life affirming state being of any state that exists, right? Before suicide, someone's in that state of intense shame very often. And right above that is guilt. But then as you kind of go up the scale, you have something like fear or even pride, which he considers non-life affirming states, but they're more life affirming than things like shame or otherwise.
Interesting.
And then it kind of goes all the way up the scale until pure enlightenment, which is the highest state, which is kind of eternal life.
Yeah, where we're all headed towards of some sort.
I think at that state, there's a sense of, he actually doesn't describe it too much because there aren't too many words, but
no labels.
But I think one way,
ultimate
a spiritual teacher who I follow uses a term regularly called eternal life. Like, we arrive at a state where there's a recognition of eternal life.
Oh, okay. Very nice.
Right. So if we talk about, like, pure enlightenment is eternal life, where it says we are created. This is a step in the process, something that will exist afterwards, something that will exist before. There isn't time, there isn't space, there's eternal life. Okay, these are words, but that,
if we can connect to those words,
that's the most life affirming. That's the highest life affirming state that I understood from David Hawkins, using some of my words for his stuff. But the point, like, what was so helpful for me is seeing how these different states are, like, there's a ladder of sorts, and it can feel so good when we move, let's say, from his baseline. I know what his baseline is for, like, just coming into life affirming is courage.
Oh, okay.
Like being in a state of courage. But things like pride are below. And then from there, love, peace. I don't remember the exact order, but,
letting go
love,
of judgment,
peace, joy, acceptance. Yeah.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all, I think acceptance, like, one step above courage. Not so much the point, but as much as there is this ladder. And sometimes when we're ascending the ladder, we can feel like we're at the top and everyone is below. And there's like, no, there's something above and there's something above. So when you're talking about the children, it made me think of his work. Like,
like hold yourself with a little humility and just, your kids will teach you something. And if you're open to that, then
there's
then
like, it's an ascension.
All will work itself
in some
out.
way that can keep going. And even within spiritual enlightenment, he has different,
very interesting.
Different levels. Very interesting.
I'll check
It's
them out.
very interesting for me to quantify these things, and also to see what's most powerful, to see how a negative state could be more life affirming than a more negative state, and how it could be totally helpful to someone to get them into a negative state, which is something that I've always known. Like, in recovery, most people come in numb, and they're in a state of intense shame and numbness. It's like they get into intense shame, can't deal with it, so go into numb, and they keep vacillating, or we keep vacillating. You walk into a early recovery meeting, this is what you're finding: intense shame followed by a state of numbness. And somehow, if we can get beyond that, then we start stepping into these states of fear and anger, which seem so negative, but are actually much more life affirming according to the scale than things like numbness and shame. And so for me, like, standing on the outside of that, I've always known, like, when I can get a sponsee really angry, Like now I've like, you were saying that too.
And then,
Right.
yeah, and if I can get them even to feel pain, to feel sadness, to feel loss,
Grief, some of those.
grief, then they could feel joy, right? The opposite, sadness. If we feel true sadness, we could feel true joy. If we feel true grief, we could feel true love. So these are two opposites that come together. Everything in life comes together in opposites. So I guess that rule of thumb that if I can help somebody feel sadness, then I also know that they can access joy, or true joy, then they
Right.
will also feel deep sadness. So
Right, meaning it goes
Yeah.
together.
yeah.
Good. So how do we put a bow on this whole conversation? We went in many different places.
Yeah.
We started with family therapy.
Well, yeah, I
Network.
think that pulled you in, or me in, and I think that it's all like all these conversations. It's a conversation of healing. It's a conversation of humility, a sense of that there might be more out there that I don't know, and that's beautiful. Teach me, and when you teach me, and I don't want to change,
Right.
I'll open my heart and try to change anyways. I'll try to be open to whatever can be taught. And how that ties in, and how we look at spirituality, religion maybe comes from that.
Right. I certainly think that was one part of from like watching the conversation. That was one part that there were much more questions and answers through the course of this conversation.
Isn't that, yeah.
Yeah, which is neat. I
Okay.
like that. Is we're not, like, part of the reason I speak is because I find that there are kind of two lies that are told when someone speaks only if he knows the answer. One is the lie that only someone who has the answer can speak, and the other is that the one who's speaking knows the answer.
Mm.
So I think that having more of that, approach will do more good than bad. And maybe this kind of ties into the leadership thing, when we shouldn't be so surprised when we find out the emperor has no clothes. This happens so many times that people we've held in a position of leadership or a position of respect has proven to be not worthy of that. So no one has to be surprised. It's like it's not only the perfect who get to speak. It's not only those who think they have an answer or can speak in a way that they pretend they know just the exact way to sum this point up. And
Trying to over quantify, over label. That's that's this generation.
what?
Next generation, they're not gonna like labels. So everything we're doing now, they're gonna hate it. L'chaim.
I already do. So
And Ellie, thank you for having me.
thank you for coming on.
Really appreciate it.
So grateful for you sharing the space with me and for having this conversation. Thank you. We might even put it out to. We might even post it one day and publish it, and other people get the benefit of it.
Okay. Okay. I like that.